children's books, and that skill of being able to have comfort reading out to other students and sharing something that you thought was a fantastic book when you were younger is important. So there's some intention behind it, and we'll fight for that advisory to continue.
I think that is great.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No. Thank you for sharing the wonderful things you guys are doing. Appreciate it. 7.2 e-learning plan, our Director of Teaching and Learning, Kelly Jansen.
Sit on this end. Hopefully this will be a feedback here.
All right, am I good? Okay. So tonight I'm here to discuss the administrative procedures in the event that we implement an extended learning or an e-learning day. My goal is to walk through the PDF that you find with your board doc. So if you want to pull that up, and we'll just go through sections, and I'll give you a little bit of an overview, and then take any questions or comments. I've asked Dana to keep good notes as we go through, because this is a draft tonight. The committee meets again on December 4th, and so people are out there gathering feedback from other stakeholders, and we'll come back together. Our goal with this document is that it guides principals and staff in implementing this day so that they can communicate with all staff and all parents and all students in an effective way, so these are worthwhile days. So the first part, the purpose, just reiterates what the statute intended the days to be. It's only used in inclement weather, and it is an option for Dr. Jacobus. This doesn't mean that he will automatically call these e-learning days on a day that we don't have school, but it is an option for him. As you know, last year we got pretty tight on our hours, our contact hours, so having this as an option would certainly help in that situation. And the Department of Ed is really clear that the goal of these is to minimize the disruption in the continuation of learning. It should be something that is in time, something that is part of the curriculum currently. So that's the goal of these e-learning days, and they're discouraging pre-planned activities for people, and so we're having a lot of conversations, particularly at elementary level, what that means, and how do we support our students and make it more about student learning and not about the parents doing the learning on those days. So that was the goal of that purpose section. As you know, the plan was developed from many stakeholders, including teaching and learning, communications, technology, cabinet, and representative membership from the United Teachers South Washington County. And they have been going out and talking to others as well. It's a small but mighty group, and they are going out into their schools and bringing back that feedback for all of our meetings. So, and to that end, we know that this is a work in progress, and we will review it annually or after it happens to make sure that it was implemented and worthwhile for everybody. So any questions on those parts, or any comments or wonderings? All right. Communication, as you can imagine, is a huge part of this plan. And the communications department included the information you see in italics on the website, and it was communicated with families because that was part of the statute, that in the fall of the year, families would be aware that this is an option. And so the message you see there was the message that was sent to our families, and again, it just reiterates that not all school closures will be designated as that e-learning day, and that they will receive that phone call 2 hours prior to the normal school start time. So. The other piece is that notification, and it's really important that we clearly state in that message that goes out to families that this is an e-learning day and you should not report to school, but you will learn from home. So check your identified mode of communication. And that is the next part. That's a big part of this, is that the schools and the teachers establish with the families how they will access this information on these days. Most will use our Schoology and or Seesaw, but the plan calls for requirements that if they do not have internet access or have limited internet access, that we do know that, and we reach out to those families intentionally so that we are having that conversation. One of the biggest changes that Bob and his department did this summer was our new phone system. And part of that change allowed the teachers' computers to become their phones through an app. And so when a teacher is at home, they will be able to use their phone extension from school and use their computer as that phone. So there won't be personal cell phones exchanged or anything like that. So that's often a barrier for districts that are trying to implement e-learning, is that the teachers don't have a way to reach through their school phone to call parents. And so this was a big project that Bob and his department worked really hard on, and it was key in getting this up and running this year. So during an e-learning day, the communication from teachers, they need to provide that plan by 10 a.m. So they'll use that morning time as prep. And by 10 a.m., students will have a sense of what their assignments are or what the e-learning is. They need to be available for communication via Schoology, Seesaw, voicemail, phone, and or email during their regular school hours. And then again, provide that school telephone number to monitor that during the day. So communication is key into making this work. And so we will do our best to work through the kinks as we implement this day with families. Any
So
questions?
Kelly, can you
Yeah.
give me some context to
Sure.
the 10 a.m.? Why was 10 the magic number?
Well, with the goal of it being in-time learning, we knew that the teachers we're asking teachers to plan something that's relevant, so they need to plan the work that morning. We're hoping that they'll be reaching out to colleagues if necessary. For example, if there's a co-taught class or if there is a special education teacher that needs to communicate with a classroom teacher regarding one of their students. So we wanted to give them that time in the morning for prepping for the day. So that was the purpose of the 10 a.m. There wasn't anything magical about that, but we felt that the 10 a.m. would give then the students the time to finish that. And as we get closer, you'll see that our goal isn't that each teacher plans, if a class is 60 minutes, that a teacher plans 60 minutes of instruction. So our hope is that a student isn't sitting down with 6 hours of instruction on an e-learning day. But we wanted it to be purposeful, so we wanted to give teachers time for that planning. Mm-hmm.
Kelly,
Yeah.
how are we preparing kids for e-learning days? So there's one thing about telling them this may be an option,
Mm-hmm.
but for some kids this may be the first time they've had to do self-directed learning.
Yep.
So how are we getting our kids ready for that?
So so there's a couple caveats that are in place. Once this is done, then we'll work with principals, we'll work with staff. So there'll be some staff professional development that needs to be done. But then the expectation is that they are also having this conversation with their students. And so part of this will also include like what is a good digital learner and what are the things that need to be in place for that. So we'll be adding that to this document as we create it. But professional development for adults and for the students is key for this, definitely.
So I know you said that this communication went out in the fall. I don't remember seeing it, but in the fall, a lot of stuff
Comes
goes out.
Yep.
Are we planning on sending this again as we get closer to the time where this could happen, when maybe we're not sending quite as much stuff, so it can be purposeful as that's like the only communication that day, so we make sure it gets seen?
Absolutely. Especially that, again, there's a couple, for example, there's some language in the current teacher contract that needs to be changed in order for this to be in place. And so once we have this set and we're ready to move on it, then we will certainly send something out more definite to parents, letting them know that this is an option. So.
And we can send it with the weather reminders as we start to get into the chance of closing, and we remind parents what the timeline is and where they'd find that information. We can have this with it as well.
Yep. All right, the next part is a part that still is in development quite a bit, actually, the instruction piece. As I mentioned, the goal is to minimize the disruption of progress. And so we're asking on the last page that teachers do a lot of things, that they need to anticipate some time requirements recognizing that students are going to learn differently in a digital environment versus a face-to-face. Plan for that self-directed independent learning. We had some conversation about a general guideline for teachers, and we thought using a percentage of typical instructional time might be helpful. Joni Quintavalle and Ed Harkness belong to a Metro Tech users, and we're fortunate that everyone's sharing their plans. And one of the things that the schools who implemented this last year came back and said, you should make sure your teachers don't expect that it's just going to be a normal day, because there were teachers that recorded themselves doing a lecture and then they had a whole assignment, and so it was 65 minutes for one class and then again 65 minutes for another. So they were really clear that it's important to talk with teachers about, again, this may be the first time that some students are learning in a digital environment on their own. So try to give them some guidelines on that. So that was the goal of those percentages. We'll revisit that after the first day and see how it went. We have some plans to gather data either through surveys or conversations with students and staff, but haven't gotten that far either for the planning. We also hope that teachers are customizing those learning opportunities, and especially at elementary, we're hoping that their grade level PLC will have some conversations about e-learning. In the elementary, we're fortunate that there are a lot of standards that spiral through the year. So you can prepare students a little bit for that, in that the in-time learning could be something that they've already learned, and so it's not new learning that they're doing at home. So making sure that those grade level PLCs have common expectations when they send this home. So a second grade in one class is very similar to a second grade in another class at the same school. Maybe not across schools, but at least at the same school. And then the last part of the instruction is that it's important that teachers take attendance during this day. This is how it's counted as a student day. So they need to be clear on what constitutes attendance, whether it's completing an assignment and posting it, submitting a reflection of learning, checking for understanding, turning something in the next day. So just making sure the teacher is really clear on what constitutes attendance for that day, because they will need to submit attendance using their normal procedures through Infinite Campus.
So Kelly, quick question for me then, especially with this being new, would a school principal have access to any teachers during the session to just jump in on the call, or the Schoology to see what's going on, or is it all post where they're going to have to sit down with each one of their teachers and say, how did you execute this, so we can provide feedback back to the teacher?
Teachers have viewable rights in Schoology and in Seesaw. So principals could look and see a particular teacher, what they're doing. I don't know, I'm looking at Bob because I'm not sure what reporting. Seesaw, I will tell you, is a little bit easier in that they can have a dashboard and they can see number of posts and things like that. Schoology is a little bit of a bigger machine than Seesaw. So for monitoring wise.
Yeah, so we won't be taking attendance in Schoology. We don't do
Right.
that. We take attendance with campus. It really would be if a site requires like a post or a discussion, a principal would be able to monitor that if they went class by class.
Yeah.
It'd be a little work, but they could do it.
Well, the only reason I'm asking the question, because if it's new,
Yep.
how do you provide feedback if you can't be part of it? Because it's one thing to look at it after it's done, but to see it in action, I think, is important too. So I would probably, recommend that our school principals are involved, because that's where the feedback has to come from. Each teacher may think, hey, I'm doing it right, or I'm doing it, to the best of my ability, but somebody's seeing them to give them, it's just like an in-classroom feedback is what
Yep.
I'm kind of pointing to.
Absolutely.
And I like the idea, because quite honestly, this whole skill set will help them later on, because more and more companies are going to all digital meetings and all kinds of stuff. So
Yes.
how to participate in this is actually a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It will definitely be a life skill. The other piece of this is that the principal also could then, for example, if a parent were to call the principal could go in and find out what was happening in that class too. That's what the kind of access they have. So, but we will have a venue that the principal gathers that feedback for sure.
And my last question is, what about substitutes? If a teacher is not, is that later?
So that's still in draft form, but I can give you a little bit of our preliminary conversations. We've kind of split them into two, that a process for those that have a pre-planned absence. So, because we've had conversations about, so if you have a pre-planned absence and you are somewhere where you don't have internet access, how are you going to participate in this? So we talked about that may look different, and that may be something that the principal deals with separately, versus someone who wakes up that morning and really isn't feeling well. The conversation we talked about was they could put a sub-plan up, and they would be very explicit about letting parents and students know that I'm not available today because I'm out ill, but here is the assignment, just like when you're sick and you have a sub-plan. But the absence that's planned, we were a little, we didn't want to put a teacher in a spot where they had a planned absence and then they still had to find somewhere if they didn't have access or anything like that. We didn't make any assumptions about that. So both of those will be part of this document, but I would love to hear any thoughts on that as well. So.
And there may be options for teams to work together and teachers. Yep. We were Mike and I were at Crestview in 5th grade today, and all 3 classrooms were doing the same type of lesson, where if it would have been an e-learning day, another teacher would have been able to step in with a similar lesson plan and keep kids going. So that may be an option. Again, as Kelly said, as a draft, we need to work those things out. Yeah. The other aspect, after it's over, to evaluate that first time is with our survey ability through Qualtrics to talk to kids and teachers and parents about what worked and what didn't. I've heard from other districts that then the following day when they started to analyze what was working well, then they found a lot of different areas they could improve on the next time. So that in the real time, as you mentioned, and then the after, the post will be important.
The next section regarding accommodations is something that's required by law to make sure that all students' needs are met. And so having those conversations with case managers and students and families as to what types of accommodations need to be made for these days, and making sure we're flexible in doing that. It may not be necessarily a full-fledged IEP meeting, just a conversation about what's best for this student on these e-learning days. So we're having lots of conversations with Michelle and her department regarding how special ed teachers are going to support this day, whether they're a center-based teacher, they're a resource teacher, or they're an early childhood teacher. So what does that look like for them? So we're hoping by December we have some language for the teachers that are involved in that for accommodations. And the other accommodations, we've had a conversation about staff who don't provide direct instruction to students and the expectation for work, and so they would be asked to submit what their work plan is to their supervisor. So this is what I plan to work on. If I'm a counselor, I'm going to do graduation checks, or I'm going to, so what are you planning to do that day, so that they have that same opportunity to work during this e-learning day. The last part is the resources, and that's just a start of where we need to begin with professional development and making sure all of our teachers and all of our students understand the resources that we'll be using during this day, and what does a digital learner look like, and what are my responsibilities on this day. So I can see some further information on resources, like as a student my responsibility is, and as a teacher my responsibility is. But just making sure everyone's prepared, and we know there's going to be bumps as we work through them. Every district that has implemented it have worked through things, and like I said, we've been really fortunate that everyone's willing to share. We have probably 10 plans that we've looked through, which is what you see as kind of a compilation of all that in front of you tonight too. So, any other? Yeah.
So I will just put in the plug to spend a chunk of time before we start doing this on thinking through some of those challenges or concerns, or how we're going to get feedback, because I mean, let's hope it doesn't happen again, but if we have another instance where it's like multiple days in a row, and they may not all be e-learning days, but how are we going to make sure that we're capturing that, and how are we planning for that? Yep. And similar to how we prep kids to do test taking or to use different technology, are there opportunities to build some of that into the classroom so that the first time they're accessing some of these things, there is a teacher there in person on site, or there are support staff there that can help them kind of walk through, this is what it would be like if this were to happen.
Absolutely, thank you.
I just have a comment. I think your plan is very well done and very organized and very thorough, and I appreciate your hard work.
Thanks. So as I mentioned, our next steps, our committee will come back together December 4th. And then we're also waiting, the contract language does make an impact on this, so until that is settled, then this wouldn't be in play. But if you have feedback, I appreciate it. If you want to email me, or if you are out in the community and you hear parents' questions, how is this going to work? What does this look like? If there's anything you want to pass my way, please do so.
All right, thank you very much. 8.0 information items. 8.1 podcast partnership, and Corey Thompson, our Director of Achievement and Integration, will talk with us on this item.
Good evening, Chair Brunette, board members, and Dr. Jacobus. Tonight, we're going to be talking about our multi-district collaboration through the Achievement and Integration Department. I'm going to have our guests introduce themselves. Oh, yeah.
I'm Eric Anderson. I'm a licensed school counselor, and I currently serve as the Coordinator of Equity and Integration for Stillwater Area Public Schools. Thank you for having us tonight.
Yes, thank you. And I'm Stephanie Atkins. I'm the Executive Director of a nonprofit called Story Arc.
Hi, my name is Felicia. I was in podcast camp, and I'm a senior at Park High School.
Hi, I'm Emily. I'm a senior at Park High School and also part of podcast camp.
All right, everybody, when we talk, I'm going to have you pick these mics up when it's your turn, okay? Just to give everybody a little information about Achievement and Integration, the purpose of Achievement and Integration for Minnesota program is to pursue racial and economic integration, increase student achievement, create equitable educational opportunities, and reduce academic disparities based on students' diverse racial, ethnic, and economic backgrounds in Minnesota public schools. And it comes from the Minnesota Statute, Section 124D 861, and Section 124D 862. One of the expectations for Achievement and Integration funding is partnering with other school districts to provide an integrated learning environment for our students. And so that's why we have Eric here and Stephanie to talk about our partnership that we did with Stillwater Public Schools over the summer with our two students that are down below with the podcast camp. Mason Fong, our community cultural liaison, was the one that did a lot of the footwork with Eric to get our two students involved. I'm now going to turn it over to Eric and Stephanie.
All right. And I want to start by saying the Department of Education in 2018, in essence, gave us permission to partner with South Washington County. The fact that we can doesn't necessarily mean we should, and I want to talk to you about why we're so zealously enthusiastic about partnering with you guys. When we met with your learning and innovation team, there was kind of a takeaway, and it was an approach to how we work with students. And I think of it kind of as a mathematical equation. So the non-negotiables were authentic relationships. We have to establish authentic relationships with our kids. Plus, high student engagement. If we want our kids to learn at high levels, they need to be engaged. Plus, vigorous instruction. And that's different than rigorous instruction because it means that we have to be flexible in the how. We have to incorporate some of those culturally inclusive teaching strategies that you heard about earlier. And if we do all of those things, then ultimately we end up with what we describe as limitless learning potential. So every time I get a chance to partner with Corey, who's a possibilities thinker, I get really, really, really excited. You're lucky to have her. So the second piece then really is around, there's kind of, you have to have sort of some shared direction or some shared focus. And there's really 4 main areas where I see partnership potential. The first is around professional learning. And your district is way ahead of the curve in terms of the WIC-CORE strategies you heard about Avid earlier. Those are evidence-based teaching strategies that you're currently incorporating as part of universal design. So we have teachers coming over to Altman to learn from you. You offer summer path trainings. We tap into those trainings. So that professional development piece is a really, really good potential. The second is family and community engagement, and really doing a better job, the 2 of our districts, of reaching out to our traditionally underserved communities. And in our district, that's our Native American families, it's our Latino Hispanic families, and our African and Muslim families. And currently we're in the process of exploring some professional learning around working with the Islamic Resource Group, the IRG, and using the mosque as a conduit to do some of that training. The third is college and career readiness, and I've already kind of touched on that. And then finally, the reason we're here is this idea of cross-district student programming. So our collaboration with StoryArc really started around an initiative called Reimagine Minnesota, which you may or may not be familiar with, but the idea of superintendents across the state coming together and saying, how can we have a mindful approach to narrowing the opportunity gap? And one of those strategies, strategy E, is around authentically elevating student voice. So by this joint podcast endeavor, we give students the opportunity to speak their truth using the creative writing process. So I'm gonna leave it there as sort of the administrative role and let the people who are doing the amazing work, including our students, talk a little bit more about that.
Well, I'll just start out by saying one of the really important pieces to the work that StoryArc does is that it's student-initiated and student-led. And so I'm going to turn it over in a moment to Emily and Talisha. I'll ask you a couple questions just so that I'm not leaving you hanging there. But really it's about authenticating and uplifting and amplifying the voices of students. And so I want to make sure that we do that here tonight as well. But what we do at StoryArc is we ask students, what's your story? How do you want to tell it? Because everyone has something that they want to share. We usually do it through fiction because it's really fun to tell stories. And our students come together in creative teams in order to communicate, collaborate, and connect with each other to do, in this case, podcasts, but they also, both of you are now becoming involved in short films, and also literary endeavors with prose poetry and visual arts. That's a part of a literary magazine that, again, can go and be inclusive of all students everywhere. And so, the most important piece, though, is about the student-initiated and student-led, and maybe the 2 of you could just talk about what that looks like to you and why that's important.
Hello. So through podcast camp, we, along with some students from Stillwater High School, got the opportunity to discuss about what we went through, going to a predominantly white school and being a person of color. So we got to choose a topic that we would like to discuss through our podcast and what story we like to tell. I personally chose realistic fiction. So we got our experiences together and we made it into a story. And I personally feel like it's a really good way to become a personal advocate by telling a story through a podcast, and it's a really fun way to do it too. And it gives a wider scope of understanding and educating others and yourself.
You're okay? Yeah. Is there more that you want us to share?
Not yet.
Okay.
Just a minute. Next slide. So how does it fit into our strategic plan here in South Washington County Schools? It's actually in our personalization. When our personalization, it says we'll engage, motivate, and empower each student through personal instruction, creating shared ownership of learning. Learners will have a voice so they can drive the learning, have self-awareness of strengths and weaknesses, and can articulate how they have grown. Personalized learning in District 833 will connect the interests, talents, passions, and aspirations of each learner so their learning is fun, engaging, and ongoing. And they just gave an example of that just now, Emily did. So the next piece, we have an actual video that shows the work that they did over the summer.
I was made small. That's when I feel small. Made small. Felt small. Feel small. Not really angry, just tired.
people don't know what specific minority groups go through. They don't know like the struggles or the things that they have in mind but don't get to share out to the world publicly. Some of us don't have a voice or a place to raise a voice because we're always being shut down and always like putting like under because like they like not like important enough to be able to raise up and talk about issues that arise.
Our goal at Story Arc is to create a safe space for all voices to be heard, where youth from all different kinds of backgrounds and all different kinds of religions and all kinds of different points of view can share their stories with each other and have their voices amplified and heard.
Everybody has a story that they want to tell the world, and I feel like this is an amazing place for no matter what you look like or your ideas, you get to tell your story.
Being involved in Story Arc helped me branch out, helped me learn how to speak my voice.
Story Arc has helped me not only have like a community to talk to about this, but also a platform.
We could tell our own stories in our own ways, and Stephanie would just be there to like support us in any way, and like, you know, she wasn't there to like tell us how to tell our story, she was just there to like amplify that.
And I found like the podcast community, and like I used the podcast to show like my voice and like just to get away from the problems that's been happening at school.
Stillwater Area Public Schools became very involved in a statewide initiative called Reimagine Minnesota. And what Reimagine Minnesota is attempting to do statewide in our public schools is eliminate predictable opportunity and achievement gaps. Two of those strategies, strategy E, is about authentically elevating student voice. The other strategy, strategy F, is eliminating adult behaviors that contribute to these predictable outcomes. So the way to gain insiders' eyes is through the student's experience. That's what Story Arc provides us the opportunity to do. Through their creative writing process, we're able to work with students in a psychologically safe environment and hear those stories and elevate those stories and empower our students to be a part of the solution.
So what's important to us at Story Arc is that everything that we do is student initiated and student led. That what I like to say is I'm the door opener. My job is to open the door and to keep it open so that students can walk in and find the support, the resources, and the nurturing that they need in order to tell their tales and to share their experiences.
Students and youth get to be in charge, and where we get to be, you know, the ones that are doing everything, which is so fun. And I just feel like it's an amazing opportunity.
It's important to help students, you know, investigate these things so that they can hopefully develop these skills and then use them.
This is just the beginning, and like maybe like 5 years from now, if we're still going on with podcast group, like we can show like students or children to like know how to use their voices and like probably know how to do something when they're like at school because of the podcast that we're doing right now.
In this world where there is so much acrimony and so many people talking over each other, not even talking over each other, but yelling over each other, that the only way we're going to learn to collaborate with each other, the only way we're going to be able to communicate with each other is if we remember the art of storytelling.
So one of the questions we have for our students is just, how did you feel going through the podcast over the summer? And then would it be something you would say we should do here in the district?
Wait, sorry, can you repeat that?
Oh, I need to repeat that
yes,
again.
please.
How'd you feel about the podcast camp this summer?
It was very comforting knowing that a lot of other students have been going through the experience we've been through, and it was like a cool way to share your story, and it wasn't like you were singled out. It was like we're all been through the same thing. You can speak your mind and feel just comfortable.
And I wrote why I liked podcast camp. Well, for me, I got to meet new people, and I worked with others, other people of color, and I got educated by others and others' experiences through like school or whatever. And podcasting like doesn't only have to be about like experiences through school. Like for me, I usually do podcasts that are talking about like what was it, fiction, realistic fiction. Sorry, and I kind of wanted to like get away from that and like experience something new. So I did like comedy. There was like interviewing and like I don't know if you guys heard of, but like it's like a red talk, and like you like talk with others and like get their ideas and everything. It's like I really liked it. I just need to tell you that I really did like it. and yeah, that's why I feel like this would be like a great addition to 833 district. And yeah.
Thank you.
Great job.
So I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie to talk about how they won an award for the work that they did.
Yeah, it was, oh, I'm sorry, I keep forgetting this.
No, that's okay.
Yeah, it was very exciting. The opportunity actually to apply for this award was given to me or indicated by Mr. Anderson here, Eric. And so what I did is on behalf of the students, because it was an adult who needed to fill out the application, and I didn't even tell you guys because I didn't want to raise your hopes in case, it went to naught, is I just told Cultural Jambalaya about the work that the Carnation podcast was doing. Both Talisha and Emily, before even podcast camp, were and continue to be a part of a podcast called Carnation that started out looking at the experience of Latino youth and what was happening. The first episode was about deportation and what happens when a 17-year-old girl's father is deported and how their family is plunged into poverty. The second episode was about depression and even suicidal thoughts. The third episode was about a young man coming out of the closet in a Catholic family, and some additional episodes as well. So you can see that these are dealing with really important, profound experiences that people are having, and the students were doing it in a way that was just exceedingly impactful. They were taking experiences that either they had had or they had seen other people have and developing them into stories that really opened up people's understanding and empathy to the experience of the students. And so that's basically what I wrote, and they became finalists, and that's when I told them, I was like, wow, you guys, guess what? You're finalists. And then we found out actually during podcast camp that they won, that they got the award. And so there was a gala that you guys went to, and they created, the video that you just saw was done by a student that was filmed, shot, edited, done completely by a student with some mentorship from professionals. That's the model that we use. Again, student initiated, student led. So that story that you saw in film was put together by, I guess she would have been 19 at the time. But what are you showing the Cultural Jambalaya video? Or no, probably not, because there's not time. If you go on the website, it's definitely worth looking at it. That was put by a professional, and it was offered up at the gala. Both of you guys were interviewed in that. You guys are getting lots of screen time. And it's really powerful to hear what they have to say. So I do encourage you to go on to storyarc.org and select podcast, Carnation, and that video is there. And you will see a really wonderful representation of the work that these guys have done. So these guys are changing the minds and opening up understanding to a lot of people.
And something else I forgot to say is, so podcast camp teaches you like for future careers. So like for me, like I wanted to do acting, but like podcast is like voice acting, so it kind of like prepares you for like, a future career, and it's like nonprofit too. So it's a really good opportunity for other students.
I'm gonna skip that
Yes.
because we're running out of time, but it is in there for you guys to see, and we'll make sure it gets out to you. So our next steps in the multi-district collaboration is we're gonna be piloting an after-school program for Absent Narrative at Woodbury High School. And I sat down with Eric and Steph, and we just talked about it. One of our cultural liaisons, Olivia Austin, will be helping with that. So our goal is to, in November, discuss about the program and recruit more students. And then our timeline, obviously, is to have our introduction meeting in December of 2019. And then Story Arc will start meeting with students at that time, and then also in January 2020 after school going forward. And then our goal would be in February, we'll have our first integration, so Stillwater and 833 will come together. The students will come together on a Saturday and do some work together. And then meet throughout the year to start creating and collaborating and doing a student voice. And then our goal would be in the summer to have the podcast camp again, but it'll just be larger and more of our students. Are there any questions?
So I think this is amazing and incredibly powerful, and so I don't want you, thank you for coming, certainly, and thank you for sharing this and being willing to share this, because it is very powerful and it is really important. And I really want to encourage the district to think about this not as an after-school activity or a thing that we do in the summer, but how are we integrating student voice into our classrooms? Because that experience and that narrative and those stories and that ability to advocate for yourself and your needs and your lived experience shouldn't be an after-school club. That should be part of how we conduct business as a district. And so I think that's our job as adults to figure out how we can make that more accessible to more students, because certainly it creates an amazing opportunity for student voice.
So this is gonna start at Woodbury. Would the summer would it still be only
allocate how many students we choose to serve and all of that? The idea is to broaden the scope.
Yes.
And the idea is to take extracurricular activities and have them kind of be infused in all things we do within our district. And I did really quickly, Heather, want to respond to something that you said. We have a podcast camp called Broad Spectrum. And recently they met with our middle school Phi-Ed teachers because they're getting ready for the swimming unit. Right? And these adolescent girls wanted to tell these Phi-Ed teachers about their lived experience. And as a result of that rich dialogue, they're responsibly adapting and making some changes to the way in which they approach that curriculum. So it's kind of a concrete example, I think, of what you're referring to.
And certainly important to understand adolescent boys' lived experience, not just female identified students, but certainly having been a middle school girl who did the swim unit, that's appreciated.
Yes, ma'am.
And this year too is a part of just our pilot, like figuring out how can we make this a bigger for our students.
Yeah.
And so when he's talked about one of the logistical things that more to come about
I
it.
just think it just
Yeah.
sounded amazing, and I wish all of our students, because I think they all need this type of thing. I mean, just listening to you guys talk about it, I can't even put words to it because it was just so powerful, even just watching that video.
You're welcome to join.
I would tell you, if you go on the website and watch their podcast, it's first the creative writing process. You have to come up with the story. But there was this positive lesson in there, the girl that you would never have invited in, and then she came around. So I think there's just all of the learning targets that you could pull out of that. And then the acting piece, because it is voice acting. And it's really, I think there's a huge enjoyment to the project, but then the lessons that the students put together, I think, are really impressive.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
It might have been that both.
8.2, first reading of revision to policy 206, Assistant Superintendent Mike Johnson.
Good evening. Tonight I'd like to present our first reading of Policy 206, Public Participation in School Board Meetings. A while back, Keith and I had discussed some suggestions to add wording about no public comment on agenda items unless required by law or unless there was an exception made by the board. So Keith directed me to contact Mick Waldsberger about this, and after some time, Mick had recommended that the district make the changes that I had placed on there for Policy 206 into alignment with what we presently do, our actual practices. On Section 6, Part C would be the public comment, and Part E would be the speaking component. And he also advised us to strike altogether Section 7, that's the penalties for violation of data privacy. They're in statute already, and putting them in our policy just seems to be redundant. And also, he felt it could impact potential defenses that the district might otherwise have too. Keith, at this time, if you'd like to add any comments as well, please feel free to do so.
As Mike said, just tightening that policy up. We had flexibility to do some of the things when we had boundaries in that where we might have had some comment where we had an agenda item. This makes it much more clear and just makes it more definitive and fits into what our practice has been.
Anyone have any questions?
I would say the question that I asked Mike already was whether this was restricting our public's ability to make public comment, or as I was reading it, it was opening up a little bit public's ability and the board's ability to be more responsive. And so that was how I read it. So I just want to be clear, because reading policies is not probably a lot of people's norm, but I think it is an effort by the district to create more opportunities for public engagement and for responsiveness to some of the public comments that come before us as a board. So I thought it was really good to put that into policy language, because who knows? We may not all be here in a couple years, and good to set that precedent and put it in language.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree, Heather, because part of what I've seen, frustrations I've had too, is when somebody presents to us and quote unquote their information's a little different than possibly we know. I think it would be good for us to be able to ask those questions and not, and this policy now actually says it, so this way you can get that clarification right at the time. You can ask staff right away, hey, what's the other version, what's the other side of the question here, or the statement. So I would certainly support this.
Anyone else? All right. So at this time, we will take public comment if anyone has any comments on this particular policy. All right. Hearing none, we'll just, it'll be back next time. Thank you. 8.3, our negotiation update, and Katie Schwartz will give our update this evening.
South Washington County Schools is committed to providing regular updates for the collective bargaining agreement negotiations with the United Teachers of South Washington County, UTSWC. The district and UTSWC share a common interest, the success of all students, and we are committed to working together to reach an agreement that will benefit our students and those who contribute to their success. Negotiation committee members from District 833 and UTSWC met on October 29th. At that meeting, District Negotiation Committee members presented a proposal to committee members from UTSWC that offered the teachers a 1% increase to the salary schedule in year 1 and a 1.25% increase to the salary schedule in year 2, which was an increase from the last proposal. These increases, combined with schedule increases from step movement and increases in district health insurance contributions resulted in a total package increase of 5.1% over 2 years. The UTSWC Negotiation Committee reviewed the proposal. The two committees had further discussion regarding the proposal, at which time the UTSWC Negotiation Committee made the decision to petition the Bureau of Mediation Services, BMS, for mediation. Either negotiation committee may petition the BMS for the services of a mediator. The mediator convenes a meeting to help the parties find a basis for resolving the dispute on terms that are acceptable to both parties. The mediator examines and analyzes positions and interests to ensure that both parties have a clear understanding of the issues before them. Attempts are made to identify priorities and focus the parties' efforts on problems that must be solved for an agreement. The mediator works to foster an atmosphere that is conducive to idea sharing and problem solving. The first mediation session is scheduled for November 15th. Both committees continue to work positively towards an agreement, and both sides have stated they are committed to coming to an agreement in the near future. An update on the progress of negotiations will be reported at the November 21st school board meeting. The district will continue to provide regular updates as the negotiation discussions proceed on our website at www.sowashco.org under the school board section.
Thank you very much. 9.0 are discussion items. We have none this evening. 10.0 are action items. We have none. 11.0 are reports and comments. 11.1 is our superintendent's report.
Thank you. Over the past 2.5 years, Shelley Schaefer has led the district's communication department and worked to promote our strategic plan, refresh our brand, improve our communication processes, and help standardize our message and documents. She has been an important member of the cabinet and has provided guidance to all of us in the district regarding simple and complex communication strategies. From the very first day she started, she has been involved in every major decision and issue we have faced in our system, and she has helped to build a communication structure that continues to support and enhance the trust our public has in our work. Shelley came to this position already committed to the district. She was an active voice in our parent community, participating in school and district committees and helping to support various referendums. In her role as the Director of Communications and Community Relations, she applied this extensive knowledge of our district and her previous work experiences to help make our district stronger. Her work has played an important role in building strong relationships with our parents and community as a whole. Shelley has been part of several large district accomplishments during her time here. She's worked on the successful referendum campaign in 2017, and because of that support from our community, Shelley was part of the planning and communication regarding the construction of the new Oldman Middle School and remodeling and move of Nuevas Fronteras Spanish Immersion Elementary School. In addition, Shelley has taken on several large projects to help refresh the district's look and improve the way we reach out to our community. She oversaw the redesign of our district website to help improve overall user experience and increase ADA compliance. She has worked with technology to help bring the new boardroom to fruition, including the overhaul of the control room and refresh of Channel 15. Soon the community will see her work again with the rollout of the redesigned quarterly newsletter, The Window on Education, which will be arriving at homes at the end of this month. She has been facilitating our communication regarding celebrations and positive news, as well as managing our crisis communication. Shelley does all of these things with a smile and a positive can-do attitude, even when we were on the phone at 2:30 or 3:30 a.m. preparing for a weather update and potential school closing. Shelley's passion and commitment to our district has been constant in her time here, and we will greatly miss her voice at the table and on our 5:30 a.m. snow day call. So this is Shelley's last meeting, and I just wanted to highlight a bit of her work and tell her how much we'll miss her and wish her the best of luck in her new endeavor.
Thank you.
And no rebuttal.
All right, 11.2, school board member reports. We'll start with Pat.
I have no report.
Heather?
I will pass.
No.
Sharon?
Pass.
All right, I'm gonna pass too. I'm gonna throw it to Mr. Kath.
All right, well, thanks. I just want to make some comments. And first of all, I want to start by congratulating the newly elected school board members that'll be coming on. Congratulations to Louise, Simi, and Melinda. You know, I've always honored the election process and respected the voters' wishes for new voices to represent this great district. Certainly not the result I had wished for personally, but I now want to do everything I can do to make for a smooth transition for those newly elected board members. So I reach out to each one of them to whatever I can do to help with the onboarding. Certainly, I'm here to help. The district is bigger than my personal needs. You know, it's interesting now that I wind down my school board term and reflect back on the past 16 years, I just think back, man, have I been blessed. Blessed with the privilege of serving this great school district. You know, there's going to be so many memories and accomplishments that I'm going to take away with me that nobody could ever do that. I'm also going to take away all these friendships that I've met, people that I would have never met in my life if I wouldn't have had this great opportunity. So with that, I want to thank the community for all that support that supported me. I'm just truly humbled. First of all, I got elected in the first place, and then to be reelected for 4 terms. I mean, I would have never thought that. Words will never describe the amount of pride that I've had in the community, that the community entrusted me to represent this great school district. I want to thank all the staff throughout this system. It's just incredible. I also want to thank my present colleagues and past colleagues that I've had the privilege to serve with. All their support, their hard work, their dedication, enthusiasm, their willingness to help one another for the betterment of our students, I take that away as it was such a positive experience. You know, we may have had different opinions from time to time, but I always knew one thing: kids came first. These are the stats that I always like to reflect back on that just blow my mind. I've had the privilege to be present and hand out over 25,000 diplomas in those 16 years. And that's what we're in the business for. You know, I tell everybody the reason why I drove me to be a school board member is those days at those commencements, and you have that student come up with the tingle in their eye, the sweaty palm, you know, the enthusiasm in getting that diploma. And then the other thing that's really neat is you walk out of that auditorium and you see the families and the pride that the families have with that accomplishment of their child. Watching the grandmas, the grandpas, the uncles, the aunts, the brothers, the sisters, it's an incredible feeling. I also reflected this last graduating class this past summer. Those kids were 2 years old when I became a board member. And when I think about that, I've had an opportunity to help influence their education, which is an incredible, you know, privilege. And the other thing I've had that's just, you know, one of the perks of being a school board member is I had the opportunity to not only sign my son's diploma, but hand it to him at commencement. Something that I'll never, ever forget. I know my son, I keep teasing him to this day, it probably meant more to your dad than it meant to you, but you know, it was interesting after the results came of the election, he brought that picture down. And he said, "Dad, this is what it was about." So special time in the family. You know, I've had the opportunity to help influence strategic plans, budget, superintendent hires, policy and governance discussions, and I've also had the opportunity to serve as chair, just to name a few things. I was part of a board that brought all the new schools into our community, facilitating the rebounding of an entire district to bring on the new grade configuration when Eastridge High School came out of the ground. And to help to lead that as chair was an incredible experience in my life. I was part of a board that brought new programs and opportunities to life for the students. Spanish immersion was my first vote as a school board member. Bringing orchestra online, the IB program, Inventors Labs, as we heard again tonight with AVID, to name a few. I was part of a board that made many budget decisions that brought us through the Great Recession without any major budget cuts or programs to our staff and to our programs. You know, the passage of the largest operating referendum that allowed us to bring our employees' pay and benefits to market level standards and to establish a fund balance policy that'll direct our district financial positions for years to come. You know, and before I wrap up, the one thing I've always tried to do as a school board member is be the cheerleader of the district. And there's always two things that I'm going to take away, because nothing I did. We did it together. We did it as a board. But there were a couple of things that I personally had a little plug, and I'm so proud of. I'll never forget the first time we were getting ready to do the parades. And board members like, well, who's got a Cadillac? Who's got a convertible? We got to sit and do the princess wave. And I kept thinking to myself, this isn't about the board. This is about a school district. And I started thinking, what do we have to bring that to life to our community? And then it hit me like a ton of bricks, school bus. And that was the birth of bringing the school bus to become the beacon of our district in a parade, not a school board member sitting there waving. The other one that I'm really proud of, and it's not all the way there yet, and I hope it continues to grow, is the term schools versus buildings. You have to know that's just one of my pet peeves to this day. It's just, when I heard that term and when I hear it, I feel it's just so cold and unwelcoming. When I hear people talk about schools, schools are about the people. You know, the staff, it's the students. So I hope that continues as I move on, And then in closing, I just want to again thank everybody that made my tenure in South Washington County School Board member a really memorable experience. I will look forward to seeing the district start the new chapter to lighting a passion for lifelong learners. So again, Tracy, thanks for the opportunity, and for all the folks, I appreciate it. It's been a heck of a ride, and I'm looking forward to helping the new board members on board so that we can continue this on this path.
Thank you. We absolutely appreciate both. Yeah. We have more work to do. You're not done yet, so. But thank you. All right. 12.0 future meeting dates. We have a special meeting on Monday, November 11th. And then our next regular board meetings are November 21st and December 12th. So at this time, 13.0, we will be going into closed session pursuant to Minnesota Statute 13D.03 for labor negotiations. So I will entertain a motion to go to closed session.
So moved.
It's moved by Katie and second by Pat. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. So we will not be voting when we come back. Just an FYI for everyone. Welcome back, everyone. I will entertain a motion to reconvene the meeting.
So moved.
Second? Thanks.
Yeah, it's Ron and Heather. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Happy birthday. We're adjourned.